Hello students, this is Abhijit Shah from SNCS. Today we will learn about one history topic. The name is the modern world. Okay. Historians classify history into three broad periods. So we can divide the history into three parts: ancient, medieval and modern. Each period is categorized on the basis of certain physical, social and economic characteristics specific to that period. So with the help of the physical or political and social and economic characteristics, we can divide the history into three categories or three parts. So period of transition. What is the meaning of transition period? The progression of time from one period to another in history is called transition. So when the time period is changed into the another period, this time or this change is called as transition or transitional period. These are perceived to be times to creative chaos or inactivity and decline. Either way, a study of transition is important to understand why the previous period ended. So there have another things that if we want to learn about the transition, then we can able to segregate that why the one period is ended and another period is started. So and how and why the new one emerged. So with discussing with transition period, we can know about this. Okay. In every country, historical periods differ depending on several factors, particular to the region. So every country, their historical periods, they have the classification of these times. And for example, the modern period in Europe started in the 15th century. So like this, that in Europe the modern period, that means the last one, is started from the 15th century, and however in India it is started in the 18th century. Okay. So with the advent of British, when the British are advent, then in that after from that time the modern century or modern period is started. Sources of information. So historians reconstruct the modern age through various source materials which help in better understanding of this period. So we get lots of information from various sources. So we can divide these sources into two parts. One is primary source, another is secondary source. So these materials are broadly classified into primary and secondary sources. So what do you mean by primary sources? So direct amount from people living during that period in history. So these kinds of sources or these kinds of information we collect from directly from the people. Okay. So example, official records, diaries, travel travelogues, autobiographies, newspaper, these are under primary sources. And next is secondary sources, that accounts of periods that are recorded by people who study the primary sources to interpret it and arrive at certain conclusions about the period. That means scholar articles, already those are gave the information regarding the time. So reports, reviews, books, these actually give us the information about the any kind of times. And in this book the writers, they actually collect the information as a primary source. So these are the secondary source, second step sources. Okay. So next is Europe in modern world. In modern period in Europe is said to have started in the late 15th century and spanned over 300 years. Okay. So it is spanned over 300 years, and modern age in Europe is associated with certain events like the decline of medieval feudalism. So when modern age is started, in that time medieval feudalism is declined and the rise of towns and cities. Cities are formed, and increase in trade and commerce activity increases, and the rising consciousness of individual rights. And these events mark the transition of Europe from the Middle Age to the modern age. For the improving of these kinds of sectors, that the transition is happened from Middle Age to modern age. The Renaissance. From the 14th century till about the 16 Europe saw a series of new development in the fields of art. So during the time 15th century till about 16th also, that the people they seen lots of development in the field of art, literature, science and architecture. So this was a significant event since earlier the church kept the sphere of culture and knowledge under its constant scrutiny and control. And all kinds of these things are controlled by the church in the modern time. And this period of great revival and regeneration in Europe is known as Renaissance. So this is one kind of revival or regeneration is happened in Europe and which is known as Renaissance. It is French word that means rebirth. So that the Renaissance means the rebirth. That means all kinds of things are improved and they placed as a new things. The capture of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire by the Ottoman Turks in 1453 was a major development that fueled the spirit of Renaissance. So the capture of Constantinople and the capital of Byzantine Empire by Ottoman Turks. Ottoman Turks in the time of 1453, he actually able to do too much development in Europe, and this spirit is actually called as Renaissance. And Constantinople was the center of learning of the Roman Empire, and it had numerous Greek scholars and intellects teaching Greece Roman classics, evoking rational thinking. With the fall of Constantinople, many Greek scholars fled to different cities of Italy. So when Constantinople fell down, many Greek scholars they actually fled to different cities of Italy, like that Florence, Milan and Venice, and carrying with them rare classical manuscripts. And when they shifted from their place to another place, then they carried also their rare classical manuscript. That means their books or their written information. And they were patronized by the wealthy monarch merchants of Italy, and many libraries and universities were set up to promote classical and modern learning in Europe. And in that time, so many libraries and universities are set up for the promoting of classical and modern learning activities. And other important factor that helped spread the ideas of Renaissance throughout Europe was the development of printing in Europe. So another important factor for the spread of Renaissance was that the innovation of the printing press in Europe. And in 1944, Johannes Gutenberg in Germany developed the movable printing press. So Johannes Gutenberg innovated one new instrument, the name is modern printing press, and after that the development is happened rapidly. By 1500 there were about 1000 printers throughout Europe, and printed press enabled dissemination of radical ideas and opinions among a wider section of people. And popular books published included religious books like the Bible as well as Latin and Greek classics, legal handbook and books on philosophy. So after the innovation of printing press, lots of books are republished or copied. That in that time the various kind of religious book like Bible also published in a new way, and the printing of book encouraged scholarly research and intellectual thinking, and there was an increase in public desire towards gaining knowledge. And in that time the public also interested for gaining the knowledge, and in that time that's what printing press is very popularized. Okay, so what was the characteristics of Renaissance? The Renaissance period is characterized by changes in every sphere of life that altered the mindset of the people. The focus of this change was the shift from the earlier divine affairs to that of human and secular affairs, as is visible in the art form of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. So the focus of this change was the shift from the earlier divine affairs to that of human and secular affairs. Okay, so this was the earlier concept was the divine affairs, and it is changed into as a human and secular affairs, and it is visibly visible to us as a art with the help of Leonardo da Vinci, one artist, and the Michelangelo, or political writings Niccolo Machiavelli. There was an encourage of the concept of individualism and humanism at that time. With Renaissance, there was an attempt to challenge the normative classical Greco-Roman learning encouraged people to question long-established traditions and ideas on the basis of rationalism and logic and reason, and people started to question the dictates of their rulers and the church. And this new spirit of rationalism led to the rise of scientific temper and the spirit of inquiry. Okay, so the rationalism concept evolved, and rise of scientific temper and spirit of equality. Astronomers such as Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo Galilei clashed with the church authorities for their views on the heliocentrism of the solar system. So, astronomers that Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo Galilei, they actually gave the information regarding the solar system that sun is situated in the center position, but church authorities, they believed in the another concept that sun is situated in the center. This was seen as a challenge to the power of the church, and this led to the swing of the seeds of modern science, and which was later called a scientific revolution. And in that time, that so many scientific revolution is happened, and lots of scientific innovation is happened.